Welcome to Making Work Work for Humans. I'm Sallina Jeffrey, Leadership Advisor, MBA, and PhD candidate researching the understated importance of trust, psychological safety, and the impact of narcissistic and toxic dynamics in the workplace. Each episode, I speak with leaders and thinkers who are carving their own path and reshaping how we work, from leadership and culture to learning and technology to the future of work. Let's dive in. In this episode, we're diving into AI, learning and human-centered systems. One of the most exciting and challenging questions facing organizations today. My guest is Assistant Professor Dr. Rana, a trailblazer in AI for higher education and workplace learning. He was teaching AI before most of us even knew what it was, and today he presents on world stage, including most recently at UNESCO and Oxford University, exploring how organizations can integrate AI while keeping people at the center. Welcome, Dr. Vishal.
Thank you, Sallina. Thanks for having me on your podcast. It's really exciting times where we're heading, and also nerve-wracking for some with the exponential rise of AI. And I look forward to having this great conversation with you.
Thank you. It's a real honor to actually be able to have you on. We first met when I was studying for my MBA, and you were my lecturer for HR. And I watched your work on AI grow and see you presenting on global stages, being a global leader around AI and embracing that within the higher education system and learning. And so I want to talk about something that many learning and development leaders and executive leaders are wrestling with, which is how do we embrace AI in our learning systems in a way that's deeply human. I want to touch on the fact of, just to give an example of how the speed of AI is happening. As you know, I studied artificial intelligence, and it was before ChatGPT wasn't even a household name. The speed of that compared to what I actually studied in that subject only a couple of years ago is just not even the same. There's so many organizations are struggling to keep up. Firstly, I really would like to explore how AI is reshaping learning, and not in a scary tech-savvy way, but in a very human way, and how people can actually learn to embrace it.
Yes, I remember developing the first course on artificial intelligence for business strategy for the same institution that you studied in. That was the first of its kind in Australia, where I connected dots between business strategy and the jargon of AI. Of course, it was pre-ChatGPT era, pre-generative AI era, and everything changed since the release of ChatGPT in November 2022. Everybody is suddenly an expert in AI, which is a kind of good thing as well. And so, but it's like conversing with the human beings. It's not what the corporations are trying to do. The leading tech companies who are leading generative AI, like your OpenAIs and Microsofts and Googles of the world, is creating it as a seamless technology as possible, where you don't even realize that you're interacting with AI. It just makes you more efficient, effective in the workplace. Mm-hmm. But from a learning perspective, is kind of still at the early stages. So there are still research studies coming out on how it's impacting learning and the future of it. There was an MIT study that was released on these researchers. They found this astonishing finding, which is they did an experimental design, and this is really about learning. Yeah, so they had people who were using generative AI, mostly ChatGPT, to write essays, and then there was a group of people who were using only their brain to write, no AI. And what they found in 4 months of study was, when they looked at the way the brain functions, they found that the people who were using ChatGPT for everything that they did for writing essays would decline in their neural networks, which means the brain cells and neural networks were not lighting up the way it did for the people who were not using generative AI. And so that was an alarming study. There was a very recent podcast where other interesting findings were the lack of learning actually is also a leading cause of dementia moving forward. So it depends on how you use it. So what does learning actually mean, and how do you learn in a way that your brain is stimulated to that extent where you are actually thinking and deep learning and deeply engaging, rather than just a shallow level of engaging? And most of the things that you find in organizations, they are on the basis of productivity, efficiency. They want to use generative AI.
I've always loved how you work and operate because you always like to ask the questions that nobody asks, and you have the conversations that a lot of people would prefer to turn a cheek to. So what I really want to understand is, and you've touched on it just now, AI is more than just a tool. As you've mentioned and spoken about in your research, it's a force that's reshaping how we read, write, and learn, and even what we think intelligence actually means. From conversations that you're having, what are leaders really struggling with when it comes to the world of AI?
So one of the things is to keep themselves at the forefront of keeping up with AIs. First challenge is, how do they invest time for themselves to get into learning this technology, because they have to put in their own time and hard effort to understand how these technologies work, operate, the ethics of it, and so what kind of data to upload into generative AI. So the biggest challenge for them is to themselves keep on top of what's happening. Then there's a second aspect to it, is that then there are some employees that are already using generative AI, but the organizations haven't adopted it into their work.
Yeah.
So the employees are then scared. Some of the employees are scared of telling that we are using generative AI because maybe they are not using it ethically, or they don't have an understanding of what ethics is when they are uploading the data into their generative AI models. And so they are keeping quiet as well. And another fear is of can we trust our organizations when they want to deploy generative AI solutions into their workflows? And so the first line of questioning is, what is in it for the organization? Are they trying to fire me eventually? And so if I start using generative AI for my workflows, my efficiency and productivity goes up. But does that also mean that I'm not needed anymore in the future? And so am I trying to train these models through my prompting and my understanding of the organization to eventually be laid off? And you're seeing this from the media. The fear is caused by media as well, because you're seeing that there are layoffs happening in certain types of jobs already around the world, especially in the technical space where coders and programmers, when Microsoft and Google comes and says, we're going to lay off these many people, or other companies just come and say, we're going to lay off so many people because generative AI can do the task. The first thing that comes to your mind is whether I'll have a job tomorrow or not. So should I even learn this technology? And the biggest challenge for leaders is that how do they send this message across to their employees, that how can this change their careers to upskill themselves, so that actually allows them to keep in the job rather than getting fired? Because there's so many people around the world for the last 3 years saying that it's not the AI who's going to replace you, it's the person using AI is going to replace you. And so the managers also need to understand, how do you implement these workflows into the organization? Which is, then you have to get stakeholders on board, and your biggest stakeholder on board is your CEO. So it's top down. And the CEOs who are really up to speed with this technology, is they know what's coming, so spending a lot of time in understanding. So they are trying to implement this technology without communicating. So it's basically your one-to-one change management, right? The basis of change management is, how do you communicate what's coming? And no matter how much we teach in the universities to the CEOs who have got MBAs, they still fail at the basics of change management, which is start with being authentic in your communication with your employees. What are you trying to actually achieve? There's one of the case that we were providing consulting for. One of the CEOs decided that we will sign up to a contract with OpenAI Enterprise, and we will have OpenAI train the models for us, and without communicating to the employees. And suddenly he found that the employees were resistant. They hated it because their perception was, the CEO went behind our backs and signed up a contract with OpenAI. Is he trying to get rid of us? But actually, the CEO's intention was exactly opposite. That he wanted them to, at the forefront of it, as an organization that invested in this technology. So they signed up the contract with OpenAI, so that the employees can become the best version of themselves and train themselves into AI, so they can have high productivity. But the perception was there was no communication.
Yeah, absolutely. When I studied change management, that was the biggest learnings. And it's so basic and so simple. if you bring everybody on the journey from the beginning, you engage, you're transparent, and you're authentic in your communications, and people know what your intention is behind bringing in like technology such as AI into the business, then that is where you'll get people on board and embrace it. It's funny because I was going to just literally ask you, where do you see as the opportunity to amplify human potential in the workplace when it comes to AI? And do you think that the first step is really about engaging with your employees from the beginning, clearly communicating and articulating that is what your intention is?
My PhD was around job characteristics model, which is evaluating every task that is done within a job description. And I came up with a new construct called non-preferred work task, which is tasks that employees do not prefer to perform. And again, it's very subjective. So there's individual differences. So a task that I may prefer to perform, Sallina, you may not prefer to perform. So how can we then redesign our jobs with tasks where I have more tasks than I prefer to perform? And there will be, of course, some tasks that I do not prefer to perform, but they are part of the job. And if I can have more tasks that I prefer to perform now, and so this is what I've said in 2018 on a YouTube recording for my university, and people laughed at me because 2018, there was no generative AI. And now it's 2025, full circle. And this is exactly what's happening, that a lot of the tasks can be automated, can be done by AI. And then there is AI plus human, and then there is human alone. So there's 3 different types of tasks. This is what we did with this CEO who would now sign the contract, and the people now are forced to use generative AI, of course, with hesitance because they have the perception that they're going to lose their jobs. But now what we are doing for them is we are going through individual job descriptions on what are the tasks, and it's a time consuming process. It's a 1-year contract. You start evaluating every single task that a person does, but now it's changed from non-preferred preferred to automation versus human AI collaboration. So what are the tasks within your job description that can be done with AI alone, where human in the loop is very important, and there only the human can do the task. And so it comes down to individual tasks. It's a continuous learning process for the organization, at least for the first few years. So I would say the organization CEOs must sit down with their human resource managers or directors of human resource and start reevaluating the job descriptions to understand what are the tasks that AI can do. And of course, being flexible at the same time, that during this process of transitioning, there will be more tasks that the AI will be able to do in the future than where human in the loop is required. So it's not an easy way out for the organization. It's a big transition. And this is one of the ways that we are doing it with one of the organizations in Australia.
It's a very interesting point that you make because, as you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, because it sounds like a big task, there's 2 ways that we can go down this path, right? And ask, one, what is the positive impact to an organization if they take these steps, which you've just articulated that in a very simple way, where step 1 of how to introduce AI into your workplace to be able to get the most out of your humans. Let's look at the positives of what that means for an organization if they take this approach and break down what can be done by machines and what can be done by humans. And then look at the other side of it, where it's like, what is the impact to businesses who turn a cheek and don't embrace AI within their workplace to amplify and increase productivity?
Well, it's very simple answer for the businesses that don't adapt. They will die. As simple as that, because they will be out of competition. Because if the production costs are higher, the labor cost is higher, especially in the Western economies. Labor cost is a killer. And that's why these tech companies are trying to take advantage of the organizations on the name of productivity and efficiency. Is we are going to increase your productivity through these tools. And that's why it's becoming more seamless and seamless. You don't see the AI, with the AI agents now are able to just take control of your computer and do things for you now. And it's only the beginning of it. But you see a lot of people, again, from that fixed mindset approach. And what I mean by fixed mindset approach is this is how it's always been done. These are the biases. These are the assumptions that we make. And so this is never happened. So it will never happen. And in the last 3 years, you've already seen that many of the assumptions are broken because of the way the AI is accelerated on a daily basis. It's only going to learn from you. That's why they say if they're giving you free access, if you're getting something for free, then you are the product. So you are the product for them and you are training the machines. And so with this generative AI, only going to get better from here. But again, depends on the type of business that you're in.
I wanted to go back into your research because looking at how organizations can break down the old model, your recent research that you're presenting at Oxford, you talk about Paulo Freire's model of education, where knowledge is deposited into students like coins into a bank, which I found that such a good analogy to use. And you argue that AI could actually break down these rigid top-down systems. And so what does that mean in practice for organizations that are still using traditional compliance-heavy training models? And so looking at how can leaders move away from compliance-heavy training models and slowly embrace AI into their learning systems?
With this shining AI that's just become the talk of the town, not necessarily everything has to have AI just because AI is out there. Compliance is a very important part of an organization. And so it is what you could use AI through learning and development is you could gamify the compliance aspects of it, make it like a game because, Gen Z is entering to the market. They're very much into different ways of learning, and especially at the university, when we train them, we gamify for them our education modules a lot and through their experiential learning in the universities. So when they go into the organization, these boring compliance manuals that they need to understand, which is quite important for the job, because especially if you are an engineer and if you don't follow the right compliance, you're going to put your lives at risk. So these compliance modules, from an L&D perspective, you could use AI to use VR, AR, virtual reality or augmented reality to just make it more interactive, more playful, but again, experiential learning at the same time. But that cost investment. They are not cheap. And so the organizations have to think really deeply on the strategies, how they want to introduce AI. Do they just want to go fancy and depending on the money and the budget they have? So they could keep it easy and gamify these modules for compliance. They become playful to learn. That's where they can embed AI. They can use AI to automate. So AI agents, for example, one of my colleagues in Australia is developing an AI agent for assessing competencies of students. AI designs the tasks for you. The students do the task on that AI agent, and the AI agent that gives you feedback. The human in the loop go through the feedback, and then they talk to students in the classroom. That could be done in the same way or a similar way for organizations, where an AI agent can run the whole competency framework for you. What are the compliances that you must know, and reiterate them to you until you pass the test. But I see that a lot of organizations are kind of doing that already. They have automated their compliance modules where you don't have to go and meet an individual and spend hours and hours of training to compliance, depending on what kind of compliance again. But if this is very theoretical compliance that you just need to understand, for example, if you're a university employee and then you have to understand the compliance of managing accreditation process and so forth. It's all theoretical, it's very manual. And so you could then automate this and which already a lot of organizations are doing it. But then AI can do all of this for you already as an agentic AI. And then you keep in the loop as a human to make sure that, yes, if the person has understood it or not.
It's interesting because I feel like we're going back in time. It was 2019. Brené Brown came to Sydney and spoke on stage. And I remember so clearly what she said, because she was talking about her new book, Dare to Lead. And she was saying that if you're just being a transactional leader, you're in trouble. And as you just said before, you're going to be made redundant because the machines are coming. But at that stage, and still, we're still human. So am I right in saying that if you can open up about AI and embrace it in a way where the thought process is that AI is going to enhance your business because it's going to reduce the manual tasks, it's going to increase productivity because, as you said, your employees are going to be working on tasks that they love to do, and the tasks that they don't necessarily like to do can be done by AI. Do you think that AI can ever replace the human side of people?
Oh, no, I don't think so. And I don't think anybody would say yes to that question. But for how long? We don't know. At least for now, no. But again, depending on a context, in what context you're talking about and where you need the human. So you need the empathy, you need the connection, the social connection. We all are social animals at the end of the day. And we need that human connection. And you see the biggest issue with our aging populations, and there's a whole theory called social capital theory, where why do we have so many cases of depression amongst people who are older and are in age group? Because they don't have the social connection, and we are people who desire for social connections. Now, if you talk about really futuristic scenario, which is what they are trying to get towards, which is artificial super intelligence, which is next stage after AGI, then it's a whole different world. We don't know yet. What we have speculated in our Oxford blogs and pieces is there will be a blur line between what humans are and what machines are, because we'll be integrated together, where you will have no choice but to be integrated with the machine. Now, for now, of course, there's a difference between what humans can do and what machines can do, and that's what leaders must identify in their own workflows first.
So many L&D leaders that I speak with worry about the equity piece. So who gets access to AI tools and whether it widens the gap between privileged learners and everyone else. And do you have some guidance on how organizations can use AI to reduce inequities rather than deepen them?
Again, it comes down to the free resources right now that the organizations have access to. For example, Google has pretty much provided free resources. All their models are available for free to use, but then you are the product, right?
Yes.
So is there a way to reduce the inequity? I don't believe so. It's only going to widen the gap. And that is the worry that we have. So we have written for Diplomat, a leading publication house in the Asia Pacific. We do a lot of research about equity and data sovereignty. And this is an easy answer, that the inequity is only going to exacerbate over a period of time. And those who cannot afford these models eventually will end up out of business. Eventually, if you don't have the resources to invest in your people, right? And this is not a new thing. It's always the case. The talent will only be sticking to those who are able to invest in the talent. And how do you invest in the talent costs you resources. So if you don't have a resource to invest in your talent, and when I say invest in talent, it also includes the accessibility to these models that organizations have to adopt, you'll be left behind. And there's no other way to put it.
Even for example, is what you mentioned at the beginning, where you talked about the fact that like leaders can go through each and every job description and look at what can be humanized and what the machines can do. Organizations, for example, can get access to internal models of AI that they can use, which is similar to like ChatGPT. So that's even a simple way where they can actually start to integrate AI into the business and create that productivity.
It's a good point. So this is what happened. And so it doesn't take too much money, but again, what is too much? It depending on the size of the organization. But I have a colleague who works in Brisbane in Australia. They trained their models or getting access to the APIs, and they trained their own models with the data of the organization. So the data privacy issue is not a problem because the data stays within the company. It took them 6 months and $50,000 to build their own model using generative AIs. And so that can be done. Obviously, it's going to be very different to if you go to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, for that example. But it will be only limited to your own model. So that keeps your data integrity within your company. So actually, 3 years ago, that's what I suggested to my university. Is it takes $50,000 to $100,000. We can start a small trial with one area, to say College of Business, and we train our own model. Cost you $45,000. Everything stays within the organization, and so you can automate grading to a certain extent. Well, not 100%. But with keeping human in the loop, you could grade assignments by uploading this into the database. You already provide all these assignments to turn it in any way. So why not train your own models and do it within the organization? That is a solution.
That's a simple way to be able to slowly integrate AI into an organization. And it's about seeing the signs and acting. And I love in your research, you talk about human and AI collaboration. And I love your idea of learners, teachers, and AI working together as co-investigators. It feels like a radical shift moving from hierarchy to collaboration. Can you share an example from your classroom where this is collide and what organizations might learn from it?
We integrated generative AI in our design thinking classroom, and these are 18-year-old kids, right? So, and they have faced already so many challenges through their school years, and so they could connect with problems that they really wanted to solve that they have experienced. So we never assess them on the outcome only. We always assess them on the process of learning. Every week, what they did, we assess them on that. Now, what ChatGPT did at that stage, it was only ChatGPT that was available. There was no Claude or Gemini. So it could be primary and secondary stakeholders that are surrounded by the problem. And so that was a really manual effort. Then with ChatGPT, it became very automatic. So as long as you were prompting the right questions, so my role then changed because now we were learning with the students on the right way to ask the questions. And they could do that in their personal space. There was nothing called a stupid question anymore because they were not threatened or judged in the classroom because they were just asking their generative AI. Because they were fearful of being judged, now there was nobody judging them. They could ask questions, but we as facilitators, because we are innovators, we teach innovation. One of the things that we teach is never judge, especially when you're innovating something for somebody. And so this is the different mindset, the different competencies we teach in our classrooms. And these students are not business students. These students are from across the university, so science, engineering, medicine. So these students would ask, what is a stakeholder that might be affected by this problem? And to give you a list. Now we have, something we call divergent thinking, which is a lot of ideas, a lot of divergence that you get, and then you converge into one. So, okay, now you have 10, 15 stakeholders. Can you narrow it down one by one, eliminate all of them, and tell us why you're eliminating all of this to get to one stakeholder that you're going to go and interview? And so, okay, so that is the learning process in the classroom. They're able to think, or they're able to ask the question, which also requires thinking. So they become very logical in the way we ask questions. To solve big problems, sometimes the silly solutions are the best solutions. And nobody wants to look silly in front of anybody. So now you have stakeholders that you've identified through ChatGPT, came up with 20, 25 stakeholders, then discussing with us as facilitators, with their peers, who would be the right stakeholder to interview. Okay, does this question look right or not? And if it doesn't look right, why does it look right? And then go back to ChatGPT. So moving through this process became so fast. We made sure that the level of discussions became more deeper, which really challenged them in many ways, even with ChatGPT in the classroom, to think about those questions that they didn't think about. That's happening in the classroom. So that's where human and AI is collaborating. Takes a lot of effort. This is where managers can go and develop themselves in the art of authentic experiential learning. This experiential learning can be embedded into the organization. I know now AI can do that, but then it doesn't give you the same level of multidisciplinarity that you could talk to each other to come up with a solution. And so that is what L&D can put in as an experiential learning way of educating their employees or training their employees, as well as a human AI collaboration together.
Before we wrap up this episode, you might have noticed that Dr. Vishal and I touched on a lot of fascinating territory in this conversation. There was simply too much to unpack in a single episode, so we've decided to release this discussion in 2 parts. In this first episode, we explored how AI is reshaping learning and development, why organizations need to rethink job design, and how leaders can begin introducing AI into the workplace in a way that amplifies human potential rather than replacing it. But in part 2, we go deeper. We explore why trust is the real foundation of successful change management when it comes to AI, the ethical questions organizations need to be thinking about, and what leaders must understand if they want to integrate AI in a way that protects both productivity and well-being. That conversation will be released in the coming weeks, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss part 2 when it drops. Thanks for listening to Making Work Work for Humans. If today's conversation resonated, share it with someone who's committed to building healthier, more human workplaces. See you next time. This episode is sponsored by Pushfar, technology built for humans at scale, helping organizations build productive, high-trust teams through mentoring.